"You'll never be like her, Mom. Sandra actually raised me, right?" He said it while laughing, like it was nothing. Like he hadn't just cracked something open inside me. I stood in the doorway, holding a container of homemade chili in one hand and a canvas grocery bag in the other. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. His words hung in the air, louder than the music playing, louder than the clinking of cutlery and wine glasses on the table. Sandra, his mother-in-law, was seated at the head of the table like it had always belonged to her. She didn't react. She sipped her wine, smiled faintly, and passed a serving bowl to her husband. I looked down at the chili, still warm, still mine, and set it on the counter. No one noticed. No one offered to take the groceries from my hand or even ask what I brought. Miles didn't even look at me again. He was busy bragging about some new gadget Sandra had bought him. "I didn't know you were having company," I said quietly. "Oh, it was kind of last minute," he replied, still smiling toward the table. "But hey, since you're here, feel free to join us if there's space." If there's space. I mumbled something about having another errand and stepped back out into the evening air. My car ride home was silent, except for the clicking of the turn signal at a red light. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. Mortgage, utilities, student loans, line after line of auto payments to cover Miles's life while he played host. He wanted Sandra to take the credit. Then she could start with the bills. I never kept a tally of what I gave. When Harold passed, I didn't have the luxury of grieving long. The hospital offered me double shifts, and I took every one of them. Nights bled into mornings. Meals were eaten standing. My body ached in places I didn't have names for. Miles was just out of college then, still figuring out what to do with his life. I paid off his car, covered his first apartment deposit, took out a small loan to help with the last semester he nearly failed. When his marriage fell apart 5 years later, he came home with nothing but a duffel bag and a bruised ego. I gave him my guest room, bought groceries he didn't ask for, paid the lawyer's retainer without a second thought. "You shouldn't have to worry about this," I told him back then. "Just get back on your feet." He did. At least that's what I thought. The thanks came once. Quiet, rushed, forgotten by the next week. I didn't need it. I told myself that. Sandra entered the picture 2 years ago, always poised, always smiling, always just on time with her gifts and cards and perfectly curated compliments. She hosted brunches in her backyard under string lights and hanging planters. People called her elegant, thoughtful. Miles started quoting her like she was scripture. "Sandra says this." Sandra taught me that. I taught him how to sew a button back on, how to drive on black ice, how to speak calmly even when he was furious. But Sandra got the toast, the flowers, the gratitude. I sat in my kitchen that night, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the envelope where I kept spare checks and emergency cash. Helping Miles had never been a transaction, but maybe that's why I had nothing left to claim. And yet every bill in that folder had my name, every deed, every note. So I started pulling them out one at a time, sorting what was mine and what never should have been. There was no place card with my name. The table was set beautifully, cream linens, polished silverware, wine glasses already half full. Sandra had that touch. I'll give her that. Everything matching, everything curated. Even the music seemed to hum at just the right volume, like it had been designed to flatter her voice. Sandra held court effortlessly, talking about her new air fryer. "It does everything," she gushed. "You'd be shocked how quickly it roasts a chicken. I'm thinking of starting a blog. Maybe Meals with Moxie." The others laughed, even Miles. I chuckled softly, reaching for a napkin. "I've never used one of those. I still cook everything by hand." Miles didn't even look at me. "Yeah, Mom, you wouldn't get it. It's a new kind of thing, not really your style." "Not really your style." I nodded, folding the napkin tighter in my lap. I wanted to tell him I'd once cooked 3 meals a day on a single hot plate while working 12-hour shifts and juggling hospital paperwork at midnight. But I said nothing. I stayed until dessert, then I slipped out. That night, with the porch light off and my shoes still by the door, I sat down on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand. One by one, I canceled the payments. $840 for his rent, gone. $250 car insurance, gone. $60 phone bill, gone. $40 streaming bundle, gone. He wouldn't notice tonight or tomorrow, but eventually the lights would flicker, the calls would start, the balance would shift, and when that happened, maybe he'd look around that perfect table and wonder where the legs had gone. The photo showed up on my feed around noon. Miles, grinning in a new leather jacket. Designer shoes peeking out under cuffed jeans. Fresh haircut sharp enough to slice bread. He stood in front of his apartment, my name still on the lease, posing like a brand ambassador for a life he hadn't paid for. "Grind never stops," the caption read. The likes rolled in. Sandra commented, "Proud of you, sweetheart, you always hustle." I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry, not jealous, just tired. A ping broke the silence. A message from Elise. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years. The divorce had been quiet, mostly civil, and after it finalized, she disappeared from our lives like steam off a kettle. "Hey Frida, quick question. Miles said he's been paying you back monthly. Just wanted to double check before I finalized some paperwork." My stomach sank. I typed slowly. "No, Elise, I haven't received a cent." 3 dots pulsed as she typed, then stopped. Interesting. That's not what he told the court. I set my phone down and stared at the checkbook still sitting open on my counter, the one I hadn't touched since I stopped covering his rent last week. He was wearing my generosity like a costume, telling the world he'd built a life with his own hands while quietly standing on my shoulders. He hadn't just ignored me, he'd rewritten me. I pulled open the file cabinet beside the table. Every statement, every receipt, every confirmation of payment with his name attached, and mine listed as payer. I stacked them neatly. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet, but I wasn't going to let him wear my sacrifices like badges on a jacket he hadn't earned. Not anymore, and especially not while the power company was about to call. I never asked to be on the lease. But Miles needed a co-signer, and I didn't want to see him lose the apartment over one missed paycheck, so I signed, like I always did, quietly. Same with the car note, the utilities, the emergency credit card in my drawer. My name had become the safety net no one ever acknowledged. Until now, when I decided to cut it loose. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and a half-full cup of coffee beside me. The apartment's portal loaded slowly, like even the browser was hesitant to let go. There it was, my name, Frida Mae Sellers, listed as primary leaseholder. Miles was occupant. I clicked Manage Account, Request Change of Leaseholder, Add Occupant Responsibility, Terminate Liability. Each checkbox felt like peeling off a label that had never belonged to me in the first place. I uploaded a scan of my ID, filled out the forwarding address, and typed my signature. Submit. No explanation. No Dear Management letter, no backstory, just one quiet line in the notes section, effective immediately. The next tab was the car loan portal. I logged in, navigated to the lien holder details, and printed the contract. My name was right there again, guaranteeing the monthly payment, the insurance, the registration. I circled it with a pen, folded it, and set it on top of the lease documents. A new envelope, a new folder. By the time the afternoon light shifted across my kitchen wall, I had everything in order. No confrontation, no speeches, just paperwork. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about clearing the space where my name didn't belong and making room for where it did. Because next came the credit cards. The call came at 7:04 p.m. I was at the kitchen table sipping coffee from my favorite chipped mug, reading the local paper I still insisted on getting delivered. The hum of my refrigerator, the soft click of the ceiling fan, everything in my house still worked. My phone buzzed once, then again. Miles. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom!" His voice was half irritation, half confusion. "The power's out. Internet, too. Did you forget something?" I took another sip. Let the silence stretch. Then I said it flatly. "Ask Sandra. I hear she raised you better." He went quiet. I didn't wait for a response. I just ended the call. I sat there a moment longer, listening to the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower, the evening settling into that golden hour stillness. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. It wasn't about teaching him a lesson. Not really. It was about drawing the line where I should have drawn it years ago. He would figure it out. Call the power company. Realize the autopay had been disabled. The card declined. He might even message me again or have Sandra do it, but I wouldn't respond because I hadn't forgotten anything. I'd remembered everything. The hospital shifts, the nights I drove through snow to bring him cough syrup, the years I paid rent quietly while he promised he'd get on his feet soon, the dinners I wasn't invited to, the birthday cards that went unanswered. The moment at that table when he looked at me and said, "You wouldn't get it." I got it now, and tonight. As his apartment slipped into darkness, I knew this was the beginning of him learning how to light a room on his own, because I wouldn't be flipping the switch back on. He knocked twice, soft, like he didn't really want to be there. I already knew it was him through the screen door. Miles stood hunched in that gray jacket I bought him last winter when he said he couldn't afford one. Still looked new, barely worn. "Mom," he started, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to when he was 16 and trying to lie his way out of detention. "I didn't mean it like that. What I said at dinner, it came out wrong." I didn't say anything, just opened the door, stepped aside. He walked in slowly, eyes darting around like the furniture might judge him. I had everything laid out on the kitchen table, just like he used to do with his overdue assignments. I slid the envelope across the table, manila, thick, heavy, in the way that truth tends to be. "What's this?" he asked, even though he already knew. "Every payment I've made on your behalf for the past 5 years. Rent, utilities, car insurance, credit minimums, interest charges from your emergency spending." He opened it. His eyes scanned the pages, each one printed, every line item highlighted, my handwriting in the margins. Notes, dates, amounts. His mouth opened, then shut again. "You said you raised yourself," I said quietly, keeping my gaze on the envelope. "So start now." He sat down slowly, the envelope still in his hands like a weight he wasn't ready for. I stood, walked over to the counter, and poured the last of the coffee into my mug. "Mom," I turned to him. "This isn't punishment, Miles. It's just clarity. You wanted independence. I'm giving it to you." His shoulders slumped. The jacket looked smaller on him now. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just nodded like a boy who had finally been handed back the homework, graded, marked, and no longer his mother's responsibility to explain. And as he walked out, envelope still clutched in his hand, I opened my laptop and logged into my last account. The call came while I was folding laundry. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice on the other end needed no introduction. "Frida, it's Sandra." I kept folding, a kitchen towel, then one of my old cardigans. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know what he was doing. I thought you were fine with it, with helping him." I sat down at the edge of the couch, the phone resting against my cheek like a cool stone. "You believed him because it was convenient," I said, not angry, just clear. She paused. I could hear the television in the background, someone on a game show cheering, the clink of a glass. "I guess I just assumed he had it all handled," she murmured. "He said you'd always supported him, that it wasn't a big deal." "It was always a big deal," I said. "You just didn't ask questions you didn't want the answers to." Sandra sighed. "Well, if I'd known." "But you didn't want to know." Silence stretched. "Not awkward, just true," I added. "I won't bother you again," she said finally. "I'm sorry, Frida." "I know," I replied, then hung up. That evening, I sat down at my desk and opened the drawer where I kept my paperwork. The lease was there, the original document with my signature and Miles's name listed under occupant. I pulled out the updated transfer request I'd printed days ago. I filled it in line by line, crossed out my name. I'd already arranged the details. No more back and forth, no co-signing, no invisible strings. I sealed the envelope, placed a stamp in the corner, and walked it to the mailbox before the last collection. The evening air was cool. I could hear kids down the block playing catch, a dog barking somewhere. As I slipped the letter into the slot, I felt something I hadn't in years, weightless. And when I turned back toward the house, I knew what I needed to do next. The coffee was hot, dark, and exactly the way I liked it. No cream, no sugar, no explanation. I sat on the porch, cradling the mug in both hands as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and something warm from a neighbor's kitchen. For once, I didn't feel like a bystander in my own life. Miles hadn't called since I handed him the envelope. No text, no voicemail. I assumed Sandra passed along the message in her own way. Maybe they were scrambling to make rent now or figuring out whose name went on the next utility bill, but I didn't ask. That was no longer my business. I set the mug down on the side table and opened the manila folder sitting beside it. Inside was a grant application from the local community college, the same one I'd once dreamed of attending before life became about diapers, double shifts, and overdue bills. The college had a program that let community members sponsor one student at a time, books, fees, basic tuition, no fanfare, just one woman helping another. I'd already filled out most of it. The last page asked for a letter of intent. I wrote it by hand. "I want to support a young mother," I wrote, because I remember what it felt like to be one. to want better and not know where better would come from. This is not charity. This is repayment to a younger version of myself. I signed it, folded everything neatly, and slid the application into its envelope. This legacy would have no Instagram caption, no bragging rights at the dinner table, just a chance for someone else to stand a little taller. I took another sip of coffee. The mug was warm against my palms, and the quiet around me wasn't lonely. It was earned. Tomorrow, I'd drop the application off in person, but tonight I watched the last light fall over the yard and let the peace settle in my bones. The letter came in a plain envelope, the kind that usually held credit card offers or dental appointment reminders, but the return address gave it away: property management. Inside, a notice. Miles was 2 months behind on rent. A thin line of ink at the bottom read, "We attempted to contact the leaseholder on file, but it was recently changed." I folded the letter once, neatly, and placed it in the kitchen drawer beside the spare batteries and takeout menus. I didn't call. I didn't forward it. I was no longer the safety net. Later that afternoon, I walked to the bank and withdrew a modest amount, less than what I used to spend bailing him out in a single month. On the memo line of the cashier's check, I wrote simply, "For rebuilding." Then I mailed it anonymously to the local women's shelter. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I didn't check Miles's social media. I didn't ask around. I didn't want to know if he'd blamed me yet. What would be the point? Sandra, too, had fallen silent. That silence used to ache. Now it was freedom. I thought about all the years I'd paid with more than just money: time, patience, pride. I'd patched holes in his life so often, I forgot what it meant to let something fall. But now I let it fall. He wanted to be seen as a man who raised himself. Let the world meet that man. I poured myself another cup of coffee and returned to my porch, the same spot where I'd sipped and signed the application just weeks ago. This time, I brought a small notepad, a new budget. This one just for me. Groceries, utilities, a weekend getaway maybe. The numbers lined up neatly like pieces falling into place. I paid with everything I had. Now it's their turn.